Hi, everyone. Welcome to our afternoon breakout session. Yeah, I hope you all feel refreshed after lunch. It's been a wonderful day so far. This session is also live streamed, so welcome to everyone who is tuning in remotely. My name is Samantha Besmer. I am the Court Education Director for the Nebraska Judicial Branch, and I have the opportunity of introducing your next speakers. This is Trust, the Foundation for Workplace Inclusivity, and we will have Dawn Palermo and Credell Webb joining us, and they both carry with them vast experience that I'll let them speak more about. Something unique about this pair of speakers is the populations that they serve are both very, very diverse. So they bring experience from rural and city populations, as well as specialty human resource training. I'm really excited for our afternoon session, and with that, I'll turn it over to our experts.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon, everyone. It is a pleasure to have you all here today. We have a very good program for you. Again, my name is Credell Webb. I'm the Chief Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Officer for the Philadelphia Courts, otherwise known as the First Judicial District of Pennsylvania. And today we're going to talk to you about trust, trust being the foundation for workplace inclusivity. On our agenda, it's going to be three simple topics. One, trust. The second one is going to be organizational behavior, because oftentimes when we're thinking about introducing new concepts, changing our court system, we have to think about what we've done in the past and what that trust has looked like from our individuals who have worked at the courthouse over a number of years. And then we're going to take a look at current events and news. Whenever you're working in a judiciary, you always want to stay up to date on what things are going on in the world, especially as you shape your policies, because you want to remain competitive in this workplace. Just have a general dictionary definition of trust is a sure reliance on the character, ability, strength, or truth of someone or something. And that's a very powerful statement when you think about an assured reliance. You know, oftentimes when we think about our workplaces, some of us may feel that way, some of us may not. And there are reasons behind that. So by show of hands, how many of us know what this is?
It's trust fall.
This is a trust fall. How many people have participated in a trust fall? How many people will never participate in a trust fall again? There's reasons for that. So, you know, as a child, you know, you see these happen all the time, trust falls, or maybe in high school and you play the game, but every now and again, somebody falls, someone gets hurt, maybe you fall, maybe you get hurt. And the next thing you know is, I'm not playing that game again. I don't trust you. And now I don't trust anyone else who even plays that. But now we have to think about how does that translate to our workplaces when we're asking someone to make a change? Do they feel that that is similar to a trust fall? It's a question that we have to ask ourselves. But not only just looking at it from the standpoint of a trust fall, the data supports this. When employees don't trust their leaders, their engagement levels plummet. If engagement levels plummet, that has a negative impact on output as well as public trust and confidence. So in this space, when we're servicing the public, individuals are coming in to file lawsuits, maybe to respond lawsuits, maybe they're getting married, to try to kick someone out of the property. There's so many things that someone is coming into a courthouse to do. And we need to make sure that the individuals who are servicing our populations know what they're doing, that they're engaged, and that they're able to work with those individuals, because that's going to increase that public trust and confidence.
Okay, so we're going to talk a little bit about trust. So trust is like a vase. So once it's broken, you're not getting it back together the way it's designed. Trust comes in different directions. So start thinking trust from people you supervise, trust from your supervisors, and your internal trust. But what's the biggest thing is once it's broken, it's really hard to repair. It takes a lot. It takes a lot of dedication, a lot of action. It leads to second guessing. You could be second guessing yourself right now because you just don't trust in your abilities, which in human resources is really hard. That's one of the reasons I'm from right outside of New Orleans. I'm a small court. I went to graduate school in public administration. Never in my wildest dreams did I think I would have to go worry about FMLA and somebody's ADA accommodations and things like that. I didn't trust myself. I went back to school. I got certified in human resources as a result. My judges didn't care, but I cared. It was my trust level that mattered. So, and then there will be different examples that we'll talk about, and please engage. It's really hard when you lose the trust of your subordinates or any of your colleagues. It's extremely hard when you lose the trust of your leaders. And that is something that we can give you some suggestions of how you can work through it. I have a friend right now going through it. The judges just told her the other day that they don't believe she's telling the truth when it comes to an employee issue. Can you imagine? Where do you go from there? So we want to try to help everybody out to be able to do what we need to do. Okay, so now what we want to do is do an exercise, and we want to kind of discuss a little bit about it too. So think of a specific time in your court career when the trust was gained or strengthened. This could be when a colleague or a supervisor or a member of your stakeholder group or even trusted the new process. We want you to kind of describe the situation, who was involved, what happened, lay out some of the parts, and then talk about the specific actions, behaviors, or communications that led to building the trust. The hope is that everybody here will be sharing some ideas, so we're helping each other out. We make each other better. And then say what the positive impact made on your daily work, your stress levels, your efficiency, your relationships, your outcomes cases, and try to be specific.
So an example of that is in my court, we got a new president judge. I had a very good relationship with the previous president judge. So now in my mind, I'm like, I have to get to know this new person, see if they trust me. Do I trust them? And I'm just sitting here like, all right, how is this going to work out? But the buildup is that once I met with that president judge, we had a good conversation. I spoke about a lot of the diversity, equity, and inclusion initiatives that I had. She really was understanding and also very supportive. I mean, I got a chance to know her in a very short period of time, and we started to just build that trust. And so the buildup was just the accessibility and the open communication that she had that really made me trust her. And the positive impact is that I felt engaged to get back to getting that work done. So the way that we want you to do this exercise, in the interest of time, we're only going to give 3 minutes. You can either work with the people that are next to you or work right behind you. But think about an example where either someone strengthened your trust or you thought trust was lost. We want to think about positive examples for this particular exercise and just come up with some scenarios, but it's going to be very quick. So with that said, we're going to give everybody just 3 minutes to work with each other, either next to each other or the person right behind you.
Okay. All right. There we got it.
Yeah.
I figure we'll be.
Collaboration is always nice. I think we should. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
That way you can finish by 2:20.
So thank you all for the meaningful conversation. And I know we only have a short period of time, and this is a very good discussion, and I see a lot of dialogue going. But one of the things that we want to do now is invite just a few of the groups to share. If you want to share anything significant that your group discussed, we just ask that you say it into the microphone, because this is being recorded over the live stream so that those folks who are participating can hear. But if there's any stories or just any key takeaways about trust that your group would like to share, please let us know. And we do have one hand right here. Yeah. Yep. So our microphone is coming around. But that's the goal of these conferences, is to share insights and share them across the various different courts. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name's Terry Hollingsworth. I'm from Little Rock, Arkansas. I'm the Pulaski County Circuit and County Clerk. I just met these wonderful women from Florida, Tess, Jean, and Julie. So they have a manager manager, right, that just came on board, and she has learned all of the processes, and so she takes the stress off of Tess. And then it also helps, since she's very knowledgeable about what she does, then it helps her subordinates as well. So I think the key thing is that you have to trust, and that she has actually learned, and make sure she understands the procedure and can explain it, so that helps takes the stress off of everybody.
Thank you for sharing that.
Did I miss anything? Okay. All right.
Thank you for sharing that. And I love that example, because you have a new manager coming in that may not know all of the ins and outs, but instead of making those assumptions, is what I'm hearing, not making assumptions, but really relying on the staff members, the people that know the job the best, and then taking action from there. I appreciate you for sharing that. I think we have some other hands as well.
Hi, I'm Stephanie Payne. I'm from the Missouri Office of State Courts Administrator in their judicial education unit. So I work with several education committees, and we just created a brand new circuit court clerk orientation. And what's really nice, we were kind of talking about it, is we have clerks training clerks, and are making sure that the clerks that are new, it's 9 months or less, are knowing the whys behind their job, just not how to do the process. They're understanding what it means to be a clerk, how important their jobs are. And we've gotten really great responses to the class. We're actually doing our second one in about a month. So.
Thank you for sharing that. And I think that's very important for people to understand the full picture. They're learning from other clerks who are doing the work, and not just feeling like part of a machine, but instead they're feeling like, okay, I have a purpose at this organization, and I understand why I'm doing the work that I'm doing. And that takes active listening and open communication to accomplish that goal. So I appreciate you for sharing that. And then, do we have time for one more? Yep.
Okay, Marcia from Los Angeles says, as a new senior administrator, I met with a union representative regarding an issue regarding an employee. I completed my investigation and worked with the union rep to develop a workable solution. I believe that a level of trust was developed on both sides from tackling the issue. And another one too from online, Nicole said, as a new court manager, they meet one-on-one with the employees to learn about them, learn about their concerns and ideas. It takes time, but it's not a once and done situation.
Thank you. And I think both of those were excellent, because when you're thinking about the union, sometimes when people think unions, it's like, oh, the union, right? But it goes to show that they are also stakeholders. And if you can find ways to build trust with stakeholders, not just the individuals on your team, that's a great goal as well. But to the second comment, with individuals on your team, you definitely have to spend some time to get to know those individuals to build that trust. So Roger, thank you for sharing both of those from the chat. Now we're going to talk a little bit about organizational behavior, because I think sometimes people forget that the organization essentially behaves a certain way and has a reputation and has its own history. But when you look at organizational behavior, it's a discipline of social science that seeks explanations for human behavior in organizations. So if you think about some of those employees that have been at the courts, 10 years, 20 years, they've listened to a number of new things that managers have introduced. They've watched certain managers come and go. And sometimes if you try to talk to those employees and you're like, oh, we're going to do all these great things, and they're sitting and going, yeah, right. I've seen that before. You have to allow some space for that, right? You have to understand the history of that court and allow some space for that. And then if you can make some changes, change their mind. But you have to be a little bit more persuasive given the reputation of the court. And each court is going to have its own different reputation. And sometimes, for example, I'm in the Philadelphia court, we have 2,400 employees and we have various divisions. So we even have smaller cultures within divisions. The way that some of our employees may respond in family court could be very different than some of our employees who work in the municipal court. So also just breaking it down into the smaller groups, and I would even argue departments and units. So having that understanding is going to be crucial when you're trying to introduce change or even get employees to trust what you're saying or doing.
Okay, so let's talk about some of the new things that you're finding out there in the workforce right now, some of your current events in your news. Okay, the federal laws change every day. You could read them, and next week it's going to be totally different. So you've got to stay current with it, which is very hard to do in a free environment. So there are some resources that will let you know. Also, there's more of a movement to use AI in HR software type situations. So it could be screening your applicants. It could be taking in all of your possible interviewees and summarizing it, things like that. They're doing that. They're using it also for kind of checking when you need to check in with your employees and what they're seeing. But you'll see there's a discrimination lawsuit out there right now because they used it in a hiring tool, but they didn't check it. It was screening out every single applicant, and then sometimes it screens out just a certain group. So if you don't put in exactly what you need, the system doesn't build to know how to help you. So you do have to check. You also need to start thinking about your HR policies. Have you even touched AI in your HR policies? What can your employees use? Which programs are they allowed to use? If they put it out there and you're in a protected environment like a juvenile court, it's out there. So I can't have the court reporter using the AI software unless IT has it locked down. Also, I want them to check the work. There are hallucinations. So don't expect just because you spit it in there and ChatGPT gave you this information that it's correct. You're responsible for the work product you put out. Then it's also things with DEI programs, as we talked about earlier. Whether you can use the terminology, you can't. They're not going away, but that's out there. That's something to be considering and seeing what you can do. Burnout. Burnout of your employees, burnout of your staff is huge right now. It used to be people didn't want to take time off, because you needed to work, or you'd never be promoted. Now it's called loud vacationing. They're out the door and they're saying, I'm gone for 2 weeks, don't call me. So you need to understand that it's changing. People are accepting that they want to take time off, and they want time off. They don't want an email. They don't want a conference call. They want time off. So that's been a big change. The other thing is more policies are going to taking time off or you're losing it. It's also going to, we're forcing you to take some time off. And then I-9, all the I-9 requirements and the complications with that is something that you have to stay current. So some of the biggest challenges that you've seen for the AI are I want you to understand that you can go to like Fisher and Phillips will give you some suggestions, and that's free of charge. And they'll give you all kinds of briefs that'll help you with some of the challenges and help you with the human oversight of some of this. Now, what I want you to know, finding is that you probably already know this. It's hard to retain and it's hard to recruit in the court system right now. People don't stay. People move on. You just get them trained and they're out the door for you. So 3 out of 7 findings in the report, their staff shortages are a huge need. The courts facing those shortages and at the same time facing financial problems. So people are working longer, they're being asked to do more, they're taking on aspects they never were trained for that you have to train them for. It also leads to the burnout again. So, and in particular, at least my lower level court clerks, and that's where I'm seeing the huge turnover. And so you have to find ways to build them up. I can't give them raises. I can't give them bonuses. I would love to do that. That's not in my power. So it has to be an interpersonal thing that goes to the trust and meeting one-on-one and saying how valuable you are to me and what a difference you make. Go back to that mission that we discussed and make sure that they understand that their work does make a difference. They're not the judge, but they made a difference. And then we do have the long hours and things like that, but having enough time to feel like they met their needs, giving them the right and the time to say, hey, I need a break. I just need 5 minutes. Can you give it to me? Or maybe, hey, take the day, take something because you're important. So this right here, and it's in your handouts in the app. You can go to American University and you can download this. This is an organizational trust assessment, and it might be something that you just want to try out in the organization and just see if your reality or what is the perceived reality versus what you think's going on or what your court thinks is going on. So that's how you can use it.
And that's especially true if you have courts where you have your research and development department request data and they want to say, well, how do you measure trust? Do you have any data? It's just an example of a survey that you can use. So we're going to do another exercise that's similar, but this is going to be the trust gap exercise. So this purpose is to collectively identify specific areas where trust is lacking or strained within the court system and brainstorm actionable strategies to bridge those trust gaps. So we sort of started off earlier this morning with, hey, what are some of the ways that trust has been strengthened? But I want you to now think about those areas where there are trust gaps. And so you can think about this also from a workplace culture or an HR perspective. So you can think about promotions, you can think about work assignments, evaluations. Think about there are places where there may be gaps at, maybe some gaps you're experiencing, or how you've helped to bridge some of those gaps. And we're going to give you a short period of time for this, but we want you to consider the following. Why do you think that trust gap is there? Is there any history between these parties? And we're really thinking about how can we begin to close those gaps, because what you may find is that you have some similarities between your court and another court. I have conversations with Dawn all the time, and when we're thinking about it, it's like, hey, I work in a completely different type of court, but we seem to always be on the same page with all the issues that we're dealing with. So even the AI example that Dawn gave about this software that was being discriminatory, that still impacts public trust and confidence because members of the public are applying to work in our judiciary. So when they don't hear back from our HR or they don't hear back from us, that also is impacting our reputation. These are also members of the public. So when we're thinking about public trust and confidence, we are thinking about it internally, but also when it comes to the applicant. So we're going to give you a few minutes to work on this, and then we're going to see if we have time for a few of the teams to report out. You can begin now. Thank you. So we got about one more minute. All right, everybody. Thank you for participating. We see a lot of good dialogue going on. I'm loving it. I love seeing the engagement and the dialogue. At this time, we're going to see if there are any groups that want to lead out. I do see a hand over here. If there's any groups that want to lead out and share, we may have time for just a few. Appreciate you.
I'm just going to say my name. I'm a little scared to say where I come from right now.
That's fine.
For what I'm getting ready to put out there. No, from Tampa, 13th Circuit Court. What we were talking about over here in my group was that transparency with the financials. So let's say you stated before, we can't give you more money. We can't give you bonuses. But we have a lot of people who work really, really hard without accolade or acknowledgement or even the why. And that creates a little distinction sometimes because people see things, they hear things, they don't really know what's going on. But if there was some transparency, hey, the government didn't give us any money, so we can't give you any. If people had a little more clarity, it makes them maybe feel a little bit better about the job that they're doing. So that's all I got.
Thank you. And I can really appreciate that sentiment because we're thinking about perceptions. So in her comment, she wasn't saying that the court was doing anything wrong. She didn't say that the court was doing anything bad or leadership wasn't doing what they needed to do in terms of the finances, but it was how they communicated it and what that perception looked like. And sometimes if you can find ways to clear that perception, it'll make it a little bit easier and people can understand. And then coupling that with giving them some recognition for the hard work that they are doing. So not forgetting that piece, showing that you appreciate the work that the employees are putting out. Do we have another comment? I see a hand over here. Thank you. And after this, we'll have room for maybe one more.
I could be wrong, but one of the common gaps we see in the court system is sort of that trust gap between court administration, directors, supervisors, and the judges. And I think you mentioned something at the beginning. It has to do with sort of the nature of, how the judges are independent, individuals that they want to make decisions sort of independently. And there's always that sort of conflict of, okay, we are here at your service. We want to make your job easier for you, but it's very difficult to sort of prove that and be at their service because sometimes there is that fear that we are trying to make decisions for them or we are trying to take over that. And I think it's very helpful to learn skills to build trustworthy relationship with your judges and judge leadership. And no matter what, sometimes if you're the most skilled manager or director or supervisor or TCA, it really also has to do with the personality of who you're working with. So if you have an autonomous person that is my way, highway, no matter what, you're just gonna have to write that out. Or you can work with a collaborative personality and you have great results. So I think that's just something I've seen common in the court system.
Thank you for sharing that. And I would say it's a very delicate dance because you're looking at the power of authority versus the power of influence. And so you're trying to think about which ways can I use my power of influence, but also to the point where they don't feel like I'm the one saying that you must do X, Y, and Z. And we also see this in other fields. So sometimes you'll have a corporation, and what they'll do is they'll hire an organization to come in and tell them about either the workplace culture or compliance or something like that. And then maybe the CEO goes, yeah, I hear all that stuff that they're talking about, but we're going to do it this way, because they're not going to come in and tell us what to do. But in order to build that trust, I do think you touched on a very good point about personalities, getting to know those personalities, what things you can convince them to do, what things you can't. One thing that's meaningful is to sometimes get the person to get to that idea, even if you know where you want them to go. So something simple like, hey, I want you to swim in a swimming pool. Instead of telling them to get in, you may say, oh, there's going to be this great pool. It's free to get in. I hear they always clean it. There's no seaweed around, right? You're trying to come up with ways to get that person to reach the decision on their own. And I use a very basic example. It's not always that easy, but I do think it's worth discussing, and I'm glad you brought that up. I think we have time for just one more if there's another one. All right, if there are no more, we're going to talk about some of those solutions. So many of you spoke about that. Open communication and transparently, talking openly about decisions and policy changes, sharing the why behind the change, and when you can. We also know that there are some things that cannot be shared, and we understand that, but if they can't, there's got to be a way to even share the why behind that. This is the reason we're not sharing this. There's some confidential information or data that we have to protect. And when I'm talking about communication, you're thinking about it from various standpoints. So there's communication between court administrators, judges, communication between managers, supervisors, making sure that everyone is on the same page. So you may have a director that sends word down to the manager, it gets down to the supervisor, down to the staff, but all those folks need to be on the same page. It can't be, the director says something, the manager doesn't really agree with it, the manager tells the staff, well, we're just doing this because the director said, I don't think it's the best idea. Even if you don't think it's the best idea, if you're telling that to your staff, it just doesn't look good for the entire organization, and then they're losing trust. And so oftentimes it is good to be on the same page and have that communication. Consistent application of the procedures and policies. It's one thing to have a written policy and to make changes and to include new initiatives, but then if we're applying it differently to different people across the organization, that becomes a serious problem and you lose trust. And so, for example, when my job was newly created, diversity, equity, and inclusion, no one knew what that looked like as a job and within the court system. Luckily, I've worked in the court system in a variety of capacities as a judicial law clerk, as a manager in our filing center, which we used to have between 60 to 100 self-represented litigants come in per day. And I would put out a lot of fires, solve a lot of issues. When it comes to diversity, equity, and inclusion, I'm a lawyer by profession. I'm also a certified HR professional, and I'm a certified diversity professional. So when I'm looking at DEI, I'm looking at it through the lens of those three things, not just one of them. And so I'm able to talk to courts because I have that court experience. I know what courts are thinking. I know how our leadership makes decisions. And so it's more helpful than if we had an outside person come in and say, here's the diversity initiatives. And so that's why NACM is really important. I'm also sort of plugging the diversity committee right now. So if anybody has questions on what that looks like, you can definitely come to our diversity, equity, and inclusion committee meetings. Regular feedback channels. So open door policies, one-on-one meetings, group meetings, town halls, surveys, newsletters. The reason I say this is because you have different types of people on your teams. Some are extroverts. Like me, I love just getting out and talking to people. I can easily walk on the stage and say, hey, let's talk. But for some people, that's not really the method, but it doesn't mean that they don't have great and dynamic answers. And that doesn't mean that they don't have innovation. So whenever I manage a team, I make sure that if we have group meetings and those people that are extroverts like me and they're doing all the talking, I notice the people who are quiet. And I don't say, hey, speak up. What I do is say, okay, on a one-on-one meeting, I'm going to come in, I'm going to ask more questions, and I'm going to pick their brain. And it actually helped me as a manager to have a better understanding of the organization because I know what the extroverts are thinking, I know what the introverts are thinking, and I'm listening. And now it strengthens my skills. And helps me be a better leader because we have to listen. Clear performance expectations. So when job roles are defined and we're honest during the interview process and we have constructive feedback and we give fair evaluations, we build trust. And so you don't want to give somebody a great evaluation and then the next day they're getting written up. And it's like, wait a minute, what happened? Or we all know the people that say, hey, this person is the worst employee ever. We're trying to terminate them. And then you ask the manager and supervisor, okay, where's the write-ups? Where's the feedback? Oh, well, no, we don't have any of that. Well, you just gave them a good evaluation. And sometimes it's because giving critical feedback can be difficult. So some people want to avoid the conflict. But then it can come back to really bite you because now you don't have any legs to stand on. And then it looks like a unlawful termination. And I would probably argue it probably is. You didn't give that person a chance, right? Because there could be some sort of miscommunication. Training and professional development opportunities. Again, I'm going to shout out NACM. Conferences like this where you can talk to individuals, you can reach out to them. Sometimes you have to talk to people that work in a different courthouse, right? You may have something that's stressing you out a little bit and you don't need everyone at your courthouse to know. So you have a larger organization where you can find those opportunities. And it's not just about talking. It's also about the information that we share. So we have a lot of resources on our NACM committee pages. We also talk about the resources that are available through other professional organizations, and we'll get into some of those later. Last but not least, and probably the most important, accountability and integrity. If we are maintaining high ethical standards for judges and all court employees, that's going to build the public trust and confidence. Even when we're wrong, being okay with that, saying, okay, we were wrong and this is how we're going to fix it. And this also has to show up very specifically and very intentionally. So all of those things I just mentioned, when we think about the hiring process, we're looking at not only just the interviews, but when we're writing up the jobs specifications, when we are calling people in for an interview, when we're reviewing those resumes, we have to be fair throughout all those processes. When we're conducting the interviews, making sure that we're giving everyone the same questions and not when the person comes in from the university you went to, asking them a bunch of questions about, did you take this, professor? And you're smiling and you're pretty much giving them a completely different interview than the next person that comes in who maybe doesn't have a formal education or did not attend that school. Now, those things are fine. Those discussions are fine to have after the interview, but when you find yourself going too far on a tangent with personal topics, sometimes that's a bad thing, and sometimes you can have high turnover. Also, tapping into other markets. So in Pennsylvania specifically, 85% of individuals who have autism with a bachelor's degree and no intellectual disability are either unemployed or underemployed. So we did a training talking about how you can improve the hiring practices. And that training was mandatory for all supervisors, managers, and anyone who sits on a hiring panel. Because essentially, if there's high turnover in some areas, but then we have these intelligent people who can't get jobs, that's a problem. There's a gap. So how can we bridge that gap? So thinking outside of the box in those ways. Also, our data collection processes, when we're thinking about the our research and development departments, we have to be very careful that we collect data using ethical standards. The National Center for State Courts has a lot of programs on that. I won't speak to them today, but if you ever go to NCSC, they offer so many programs on the best ways of collecting data. Training is crucial. Also at my court, I participate in a lot of the investigation panels. So somebody files a discrimination complaint. I'm one of the investigators. I'll talk to you. I write up the report. I make up a recommendation. Even if I don't find anything like, okay, there's not enough evidence to prove discrimination in this case, sometimes when I'm interviewing all the witnesses, I start to see there's something going on with the culture of this particular department or unit. And that tells me what training materials that we can start to develop for the court. So paying attention to the issues that are happening in your court and developing tailored training. Sometimes it's very easy to, look up a program and say, okay, everybody take this training at your desk and click on it. And everybody's like, ah. But when you have a very specific tailored training based on the issues and the needs of your court, that can be helpful. Also thinking about offboarding. So those people that are leaving, sometimes exit surveys can be helpful. Why are you leaving the court? Just to get a better idea of what's going on. Sometimes people are more honest when they're leaving. Now, some people, they can just make up things because they're on the way out the door. We're not saying to look at the most extreme cases at all times, but if you have a process for having an understanding of why individuals are leaving, that can help you change your processes.
Okay, so if you want to maintain that trust and keep it, you better be competent. How many of us just tune somebody out? We know they don't know what they're talking about. They have no clue what's going on. So how do you do that? You have to stay current. You have to do exactly what you're doing right now and continue to grow and continue to be educated. Know what the new things are out there. Go look at your data. If the judge asks you the largest case type that you have, chances are they're going to get it wrong. Mine get it wrong all the time. And so I bring it back and say, this is reality. This is how it's changed over the years. The assumptions of the past are not the reality of today. So you need to stay current. Do unique things. Go to that front desk. I don't know if your information desk knows what's going on, but my ladies at that information desk know more than I know half the time. So I make a point of going down there. I actually answer the phone for the courthouse sometimes. I let them go. We might have an ice cream social or something and say, hey, go take some time. I answer that. I know what's coming in. That's how I find out that it took them 5 pages of notes for something. All I had to do is go walk down to IT and say, can we program a scanning capability for this? 2 seconds. They were ecstatic, and I seemed much more competent because I really did know what the problem was. And the problem wasn't what I assumed it was going to be. Here's the other thing. As you start opening these doors and becoming more and more competent, they're going to come talk to you. So that's great. But the people who come talk to you sometimes are just the loudest voice, and that might not be reality too. So investigate, go find out for yourself, say, hey, let me see what you're talking about, learn. And then another thing, and this is a hard one sometimes, especially if I'm, having a hot flash, take a deep breath, stay calm. I'm sure you heard the problem a million times before, but it might be a different variation. And they may actually have a great idea. And if I would just stay patient, I might learn a whole lot more from my employees because I'm not the expert. They actually are. All right, so where are your resources right now? You got a lot of free resources by being a member of NACM. The workforce management is just one of the 13 core curriculum. So if you dive into this on the website, you can find other videos from conference sessions which are going to have a different spin. It's going to teach you something new. But the curriculum itself could take you like 12 hours to do. So there's a whole lot to learn. It will help you a little bit with employee policies like Creedell was speaking of, and some of the legal decisions and rulings that you need to be competent. Okay, so that's just the basics of what the curriculum does. So you may not have any duties with this, like engaging a diverse workforce, how do I retain, but also I don't know if I don't handle promotions or anything like that. So that might not be my world. So I can skip around in the curriculum and I don't have to do all of them. They also have like your work environment, your ethical standards, harassment policies, bullying, retaliation, things like that. It's there to help you. So as we talked a little bit earlier, some of the current events is what Creedell's going to go into. And we have a whole bunch of articles up here that you're welcome to come look. I only brought one, but it gives us some general ideas of what's out there and what people are getting sued for right now.
Absolutely. And so some of the things that we're going to talk about are AI-powered hiring tools. We're also going to talk about not delaying on ADA accommodations, supportive paid time off policies, and just other ways of staying current. So when we think about artificial intelligence is something that we can't seem to avoid. It's everywhere. I mean, even if you do a Google search now, it'll give you an AI result. So it's not necessarily something you can avoid or say, hey, we're not using that. One of the resources that NACM has available for free to NACM members is an AI guide. So if you really want to get in depth and really have an understanding, check out that guide. And the first place that I would go is the governance section of the guide, because it tells you about which vendors, how to spot a good AI vendor and which systems you should use. Because oftentimes when we're talking about artificial intelligence, we're looking at things like Chat GPT or Google Gemini. And I think these are more so consumer products. It's not like when I'm writing in Microsoft Word and maybe I write something and I save it, it's on my computer, it's confident, I can put confidential information in there and save it. When you're writing into Google Gemini or Chat GPT, you don't want to use that to, let's say you work in, let's say, family court with juveniles. And now you're like, well, let me see if they can just write up this report. But now you're putting information in the Chat GPT or Google Gemini or one of these consumer products about a minor or something like that it shouldn't go there. So before using AI in a court setting to write reports or enhance processes, we highly recommend looking at that AI guide. Now, on the consumer end, if you just want to get used to using AI on your own, that's a little different, and one of the areas to start if you want to think about non-confidential ways that AI can help could be just creating graphics for a presentation. So something that we've done here. So earlier, you remember when I said, hey, raise your hands, do y'all know what this is? The trust fall, right? That was created using AI. I literally asked AI to create a video. I want you to put some individuals dressed in suits and make them do a trust fall. And that's what it came up with. That's not anything confidential. I can use this for my presentation. So there are areas where you can use consumer versions of AI when it really is not confidential information and perhaps it's helping you enhance a presentation. But I would be very cautious when then trying to use it in terms of, hiring or writing up a report or something like that, because that is going to diminish the public trust and confidence. I mean, could you imagine somehow you put in that confidential information about that young person who's brought their case to the court, and now it's somewhere else out there on the internet because it was fed into the artificial intelligence system. That's going to severely reduce public trust and confidence in the same way that public trust and confidence is going to be reduced if you use AI in the example that Dawn used, where it was some sort of HR application that was discriminating against applicants. One of the things when you think about AI, and the Society for Human Resource Management speaks about this, AI plus HI. So artificial intelligence plus human intelligence. So having somebody that's going to look over those decisions or those results that AI made. If it's going to write a report or a graphic, you have to look over that. And you have to have a foundational understanding of what it is that you are doing before you're taking some sort of a shortcut. So that way, if the AI system does hallucinate or give you results that don't make sense, you can spot it. Versus the person that doesn't have the foundational information trying to use AI as a shortcut, when it makes a mistake, they can make a big mistake and oftentimes get into a lot of trouble. And so the reason we are mentioning it at these conferences is because you can't avoid AI. It's really in every single aspect. And so we wanted to touch on that. We're going to be following that case. So this case, Dawn got this from Fisher Phillips. And so it's actually a discrimination lawsuit over a particular company. It was a vendor. And so after this lawsuit, what they did was gave out some advice, and that advice is audit your vendors, retain human oversight, document criteria and justifications for any decisions that you're making, monitor for a disparate impact. So what that is let's say if you have a tool that you're using and it is not discriminating on its face, right? We're not saying, hey, don't hire people of this demographic. That is definitely clear discrimination. If you say, hey, we have a system and we're only going to hire, let's say, people over 6 feet tall or something, right? But when you have the disparate impact, it's going to be a neutral criteria, but then all of people of a certain demographic are going to be kept out of the process. And so we have to look out for that as well. Even though the discrimination isn't intentional, it's still happening. And that's why you would definitely have to watch over these AI systems. Lastly, this said have a AI governance policy. So even though this case is not about courts or court systems, the reason we use this example is because these things can happen in a court system. And so you would want to refer to the NACM AI guide and read about that governance and governance policy. I think that's going to be awesome. The Americans with Disabilities Act of 1990 protects people with disabilities from discrimination. It sounds good, sounds simple, it sounds easy. However, we find that organizations still don't always get it right. And especially when it comes to what's called a reasonable accommodation. So reasonable accommodation is for qualified individuals with disabilities who are either employees or applicants to show that they're going to have a hardship. But if you can provide them with this accommodation, that accommodation will allow them to do their jobs, and it has to be reasonable. And reasonable just means that the company can still, operate. Like, for example, if you are operating a post office and you're saying, hey, we have to have mail delivered, every day of the week. And the person says, well, I can only be there 2 days a week. Well, that might not necessarily be reasonable because that's the nature of the post office job. But for example, if they said, hey, I just need you to make sure you have captions up on the videos because that's a reasonable accommodation. Well, that's not too much. You can probably just find some captions to put up. So we have to make sure that we're being timely and not delaying.
So what you do here is, and it can vary from I need a new chair to I can't work for several months. So your first thing is you need to determine if it's a reasonable accommodation. Can you provide this? Is it a possibility? Is your administration okay with you providing that? Figure that one out too. Then, does it cause an undue hardship? Is there going to be, it's going to break the budget, or you can't tear down that part of the wall to fix the issue that they need at the time? You got to be consistent. Did you have this before? How did you treat it? What did you do? Are you consistent with your policy, doing exactly what you said you were going to do for every employee, because it's going to come back? And then, what's the time limitation? You need to see the doctor's note. You need to see how long the time is. And then lastly, and this is where you're going to see in the next lawsuit, I think, they did not respond promptly. You get a request for an accommodation of some sort. Doesn't matter if you believe in it, they need it or not, respond, and respond in writing. So you respond in writing within a 2-week period, and that may not be that I have the solution for you. That may be, I have received your request, we are looking into it, we are following our policies, I will be back in touch on such and such a date. Then you respond next saying, thank you, Ms. Jones, we have received your recommendation effective such and such a date per your doctor. You're going to now not be working in the information window. We'll give you I had an employee who needed to not be around the public so much. Moved her to a different section. It was a time-limited period. Her job did not change. I did not take away her duties. I didn't touch her pay. I didn't touch her annual leave. And then she returned back when she was healthy. You may have people who need to come and go. Just think creatively. And also keep it fair, because you've got to start thinking about those people that need to cover if you have an employee out for cancer treatments every Tuesday afternoon. What are you doing about traffic court or something like that? So that's what you need to do, but be consistent, have it in writing, make sure you have a policy, make sure you have a policy for how they even request these accommodations. Your employees need to be educated on how to do all of that. So you're going to want to stay up to date on all of these ADA accommodations and document. I can't tell you enough. Speak to someone, but be sure you put it in writing. Have it there. Be prepared, because you're going to be requested someday to do that. Okay, we talked a little bit about PTO and paid time off. Things are going, because it has such a budget impact, things are going to where they're capping off the leave and for people. So you're finding it's more and more acceptable to take time off. It's healthy to take time off. It's encouraged. But as managers, we need to show that too. We need to be the model that it's acceptable to do that. If you have an employee who's not taking the time, go check in. Something might be up. It may be that they're scared they're going to lose their job. It could be for other reasons. Now, I'll put on my fiscal hat right now. If you ever have somebody in the financial world who refuses to take time off, go investigate. Take them out for a little while and go see what's going on. That's where you get burned. That's where the fraud occurs. That's the number one, suggestion that you might have an issue. So the other thing is make sure your policies are consistent for paid time off. Some courts don't accrue annual and sick leave. Are you treating all your employees the same? It doesn't matter. But if you gave one employee 6 weeks of maternity leave, but you're going to tell this other one that they can't, even though you'd be violating FMLA, that doesn't matter all the time, you're going to have a problem. So look into it. Make sure you're consistent. And trust me, not every situation's the same. I mean, just when I think I've got it under control, it's something new and we got to create a new policy. So you want to start reviewing the latest trends, which is right here, loud vacationing. You want to revamp your paid time off program. Is it working for your employees? Do you even have the authority to do that? I don't. So, see what you can do. Consider different types of leave. There's a movement to have one just general bank of leave and not worry about whether it's sick or annual or vacation time. There's another movement that you give your employees off on their birthday or the day before, whatever you can afford to do. You need to remember that there is a huge increase in mental health issues and staff that need mental health services and support and things like that. So be familiar with your paid time off in suggesting people, but also be prepared with your employee programs and some resources that they can have. Because if you do find out they're struggling, you want to be able to help them in some way. And then create metrics for your managers. Show your managers if these people are taking time off or not, because they should be the closest, but they don't always know. And don't forget the legal stuff. Document, document, document.
And one thing that I'll say about the managers and the supervisors from a practical standpoint, you have to consider things like holidays. If you have certain employees, they're always getting this particular holiday, but the other employees aren't. That's where you're going to find some of those major issues. And some people may bring it to you, some people may not. When I used to manage my staff, I would always keep a log of like the previous years, who took Christmas, who took the day after Thanksgiving. Are they consistently trying to take those every year and then the other employees are not getting those? Because the numbers may look the same, but essentially the more attractive dates could start to look like favoritism, because as a manager or supervisor, sometimes you might just approve the first things that come in and you're just trying to quickly go about your schedule. But especially when it comes to those really attractive dates, just pay a little bit extra attention so that way you'll know that everybody's getting a fair shake. And there have been instances where I have said nicely to employees, okay, well, this year I'm not going to approve it because I did approve it for you for 2 years, and there's some other employees that want to take that. And we're going to be a little bit short-staffed, but how about you get this other holiday or this other date and make it fair for them? You don't want to make it look like, oh, you're trying to, be greedy. Of course, people are going to advocate for the dates that they want. So it's all about the tone in which you communicate that, but you still have to think about those things, because if you continue to approve, that other employee, maybe they're introvert, they're not going to bring it to your attention, but just know they're calculating that in their mind. And then when they submit the, resignation, and you're like, oh, what happened? You didn't say anything. They're just going to submit that resignation and move on. So I really want us to think about the introverts and the people that are not saying things. Sometimes it's our job to really ask them, and also to just make sure we're looking over those things. Yes. Yes. So the question was about paid time off, and then it was like, okay, we talked about paid time off, but is there anything going on about leave without pay? Leave without pay comes up a whole lot, and sometimes it comes up when you have your newer employees that come in, they don't have enough time, but they may have all these things going on, and they're trying to find a way to get out of here. I think that's going to be based on the individual courthouses and legal, but the minute you said it, I know what the problems are regarding that. I don't have sort of a one-size-fits-all answer for it. I may find another way to work that into this presentation, but it is a very good question, and it's a very good thing to think about, especially with those newer employees and building that public trust and
Right.
confidence, because some of them do have a reason to use try to use leave. The answer that I would have is try to be as flexible as possible if they don't have the vacation time, if there's anything that you can do. Dawn, what is your take on that?
If you create the policies and you have that authority, have the discussion with your judges, give them a few examples. Yeah, person who's 6 months on the job, they can't take their leave. They haven't accrued it. So that's an example. I have some that they're sick. They've used up all their sick. They're on FMLA. They're going to have leave without pay, but they're also on FMLA, so their job's protected. But have those discussions, because in my court, judges won't let me approve that. I approve everybody's leave. I cannot approve leave without pay. They want to know ahead of time. They want to know why. And I give them the reasons, and if it's a strange situation, I have already spoken to our legal counsel before I'm even going to tell the judges, and I'm going to give the suggestion, but it spells out in there. The other thing, be sure to have in your policies, because this came back to bite us a few times. When your employee's out on leave without pay, they are not accruing time towards their pension, and they also may have some benefit problems. Spell that out for them so it doesn't catch them by surprise.
Thank you. Ways to stay current. NACM conferences and resources. So if you go on any of our committee pages, and we have a lot of links in these resources, but if there's a link or there's a resource that you don't see, we are both board members. You can easily reach out to us either on the app or via email, and we'll try to direct you to those. But on our website, we have a location that says resources. And so you can type in some of those things if you want to really learn more. So for example, on our resources page, we share information from certain groups like the Society for Human Resources Management. They have free certificate programs on a number of topics. Some of those topics include employing abilities at work. So it's a certification you can get, but it talks all about disability, the disabilities that you can see, the disabilities that you can't always observe, and it goes a little bit beyond the ADA requirements. I usually like to say it's like about disability etiquette. So, for example, if someone in your courthouse is coming in and they're in a wheelchair, and you're going to have an extended discussion with them, if you're standing above them and talking for a long period of time, that's not really building a lot of trust or capital with that person, and you may not be doing that on purpose. You're just working and not thinking about it. But if I know that I have to have an extended conversation with the person who's in a wheelchair, I'm going to kneel and we're going to talk, right? I'm not required by the ADA to do that, but the person definitely appreciates when you do something like that. And so you'll learn that from these certificate programs, different things that are going to go a little bit beyond what's legally required, but it's going to help you build and maintain trust. So we place a lot of resources on that. Professional organizations. There are other HR organizations or professional or legal, like, for example, Dawn, these articles you got from
Fisher and Phillips and HRCI.
Fisher and Phillips and HRCI. HRCI is similar to the Society for Human Resource Management. And then we also showed you the NACM core competency with the workforce management. So you're not going to be able to get a lot of in-depth information in this 1 hour and 15-minute program, but part of this is to lead you to some of those other resources when you want to really sit down and say, okay, let me learn a lot more about that. Because at the end of the day, we have to make sure that our workforce is engaged. And it's not always about if we're managing staff and managing staff, it's about also the people managing us. The more knowledgeable we are, the more influential we can be. So in my role, I report directly to the court administrator, who is the highest non-judicial employee of the First Judicial District of Pennsylvania. There are many times where I would like to get something done, and I ask him in a way that's very convincing. I have, data, proof, and all those good things. But the number one thing, the number one reason he allows me to do a number of the things that I do is that I've built that trust. We have some general conversations. Earlier, we talked about just understanding people's personality. I listened to him a lot. Before I came in and started saying, hey, I want to do all these great things, I started to say, let me get to know my supervisor. Let me understand personality, maybe some interests, what do you like, coffee, do you like tea, just some of those basic things, so that way you can engage in conversation. What type of movies does this person like, things like that. And if you can, and that takes time, but sometimes you can lead from that into more serious conversations. And when you do have those serious conversations, if you're coming with your resources, the data, and they know that you're on their side, they trust you. So I've built enough trust, and I don't take advantage of the trust. So that slide that Dawn had initially with the vase, you can think you have all this trust built up, and then you start to get a little, take it for granted. You'll miss out. So don't do that when you built up the trust. Keep maintaining it, keep showing out, and keep showing off. But when you do that, you want to do it with having current information. We have to stay current because technology is moving rapidly, and information, lawsuits are changing. Information, we are in the information age. All this information, technology information, all this information is coming out. Equal Employment Opportunity Commission, especially when it comes to these workforce issues. The reason I say that is because sometimes they put on free programs, other times the programs are paid. But any EEOC training program that's free, I always watch it because it talks to me about the current issues. And if an employee is going to take they say, we don't like, how the court ruled on this particular case, I'm taking it to the EEOC. Well, why not look at what the EEOC is talking about, especially when they're offering free training? There are many other resources out there, and I don't know, we have about another 5 minutes. So I think we want
Next
to,
slide. Go to your next.
this is the NACM resources slide. So that I spoke a little bit about the resources. Here's the slide. I think the link is going to be, you're going to be able to access this on your app. But you'll see at the bottom, it's very small, but we have links to everything. So you'll see sources, and you can click on those links. But this will get you to our NACM resource page. And so you can type in things like, I mentioned the Society for Human Resources management certificates, or even if you typed in disability, like it would pop up and you can take those courses. So like I said, if you can't find it, email us. We'll direct you to it. But we did want to leave a few minutes if anyone had questions. So I think we have about 5 more minutes, but we really thank you for participating, for being very engaged, because y'all were a very engaged crowd, and I really enjoy every second of it. But we're going to leave 5 minutes open if there's any questions, any takeaways, anything that you would like to share among the group.
I'm on your app.
Yes.
Resources is on here somewhere on the app.
That's on the website, yeah.
If you go on the app, the presentation is available on the app. And I would recommend downloading the presentation, because within the presentation, we have the links embedded in. And then from there, you'll be able to get to the resources page. And do we have any questions in the chat, Roger?
There are, we didn't talk about it, but the court manager has a multitude of articles over the years. If you put it in that search bar, it will bring up some court manager articles. And our editor's in the room right now. He would love, if you want to stand up, Joe, sorry. He would love to have your ideas of what you need. What do you need to learn more about, so that he can find, you may want to author something, or he can help find somebody who can help you out. Because everybody's struggling with some of the same issues. They're just a little different. Thank you.
And I'll talk to my experience. I just recently submitted an article on AI as being a powerful tool for court leaders. But in it, I talk about a number of things: how I first discovered AI, what I use it for, and then also ways to be cautious about it in terms of bias. And the great thing about the Court Manager, it's a publication for court professionals. So I'm not an author. I don't sit around writing a whole lot of publications, but they have editors that can help. So if you have a topic that you're interested in, I would highly recommend writing that. Or if you want to, if you're a little nervous about it, I don't know if I want to write that, co-author with somebody. There are plenty of people that will help you write that article or co-author something with you. And we're sharing it among the nation, among other court professionals, because somebody else is probably going through the same issue. And it's just a way to get more involved with the organization, I find.
Yeah. And find somebody maybe in here or you meet this week to be your sounding board. It's always nice. Creedell's great. I can call him up. He doesn't know any of my people, but I can say, hey, this is what I'm dealing with. And just get him to hear you out, because sometimes you're in an uncomfortable situation and you really don't want to talk to anybody locally. So find somebody that can help you and be your backup and your support.
Absolutely. That goes a long way. So with that said, we are all done. I, again, truly appreciate this audience, and we want you to continue to enjoy your conference. We'll be up here for a few minutes if anybody has any questions at the end. Thanks again.
Thanks.
All right.